The moment Alex Jones lost control, and Jasmine Crockett became a household name, it began with a roar, not a debate. The cameras were rolling, the microphones hot, but the man across the table wasn't speaking, he was unleashing. Alex Jones pounded his fist against the desk, veins straining on his neck, his words spilling out in a furious torrent of half-truths and outright lies. His voice, a storm of rage, filled the studio like thunder rolling through a small, fragile room. He shouted about conspiracies, about cabals, about enemies lurking in the shadows. And yet, none of it seemed to land on the woman sitting opposite him. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. While Jones turned crimson, his rant teetering between incoherence and insult, Crockett sat in stillness. Her eyes locked onto him like steel, her composure a silent weapon. Viewers watching at home felt it instantly, one person drowning in noise, the other radiating control. It wasn't just a clash of voices, it was a clash of worlds. The studio crew exchanged nervous glances as Jones grew louder, spittle flying, his voice cracking under the weight of his fury. He pointed, he mocked, he demanded the camera zoom in, as if volume alone could crush his opponent. But Crockett leaned back. In her chair, her posture calm, regal even, her silence more cutting than any shouted insult, and that silence hurt him. Every second she refused to take his bait, Jones dug himself deeper. The audience could sense it. This wasn't the strength of a man in command, it was the desperation of someone unraveling. The contrast was cinematic, almost biblical. One side chaos, one side order. One man consumed by rage, one woman embodying dignity. When Crockett finally parted her lips to speak, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't match his fury. Instead, she lowered it. A deliberate calm that forced every ear in the room to bend toward her. And in that single choice, she flipped the balance of power. The room fell silent not because Jones stopped, but because Crockett's quiet confidence made his shouting suddenly irrelevant. For the first time in his career, Alex Jones looked small. But what led to this explosive showdown was even more unbelievable. To understand the sheer electricity of that moment. You have to step back, because this wasn't just a television segment. It wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was the collision of two Americas, one built on paranoia and lies, the other on dignity and truth. For years, Alex Jones had been the loudest megaphone in the conspiracy world. He thrived in chaos. He made his fortune convincing people that tragedy was theater, that facts were fiction, and that fear was the only constant. From his pulpit, he spread rumors faster than they could be debunked, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and shattered families. The lawsuits, the fines, the condemnations, none of it seemed to silence him. If anything, every punishment only fed his martyr act, his story of being the lone truth-teller under attack. He wasn't just a man on air, he was a brand of outrage, a brand that America couldn't seem to turn off. And yet, across from him now sat someone who represented everything he feared. Jasmine Crockett, a freshman congresswoman, lawyer, and daughter of the very communities Jones had spent his career targeting with dog whistles and venom. Crockett wasn't supposed to rise this fast. She wasn't supposed to stand toe-to-toe with men who had built empires out of intimidation. But she had, with sharp intellect, sharp words, and sharper conviction, she had become a force that demanded to be heard. For Crockett, the stakes weren't about ratings. They were about survival, political, cultural, generational. She represented a new wave of leadership. Younger, unapologetically progressive, deeply tied to the struggles of women, immigrants, and people of color. Every time she spoke, she carried those identities into the room with her, refusing to leave them at the door. To her supporters, she wasn't just Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman. She was proof that truth and representation still had a fighting chance in America. So when the network booked this debate, the setup was clear. It wasn't just Crockett versus Jones. It was truth versus deception. It was dignity versus demagoguery. It was the raw fury of a fading empire colliding with the quiet rise of a new generation, and America was watching. Millions tuned in, some to cheer Jones, others to root for Crockett, but most because they sensed that something bigger was about to happen. The producers didn't know it yet, but they had staged a moment that would ripple far beyond one broadcast. This wasn't entertainment. It was identity warfare, live on air. As Jones ranted, painting himself as the voice of the silenced majority, Crockett represented the opposite truth, that the real silenced voices were the communities Jones mocked, dismissed, and distorted. For her, this wasn't theory, it was lived reality. Every attack he lobbed wasn't abstract. It was personal. And yet, Crockett's power came from refusing to descend to his level. She knew that the louder he screamed, the more desperate he looked. And the calmer she became, the more undeniable her strength appeared. The stakes were immense, because if Jones humiliated her, it would be replayed endlessly as proof that dignity couldn't survive in the arena of outrage. But if Crockett held her ground, if she turned his fury into his downfall, then the entire equation would flip. His brand of conspiracy would look brittle, and her brand of truth would look unstoppable. What happens next didn't just embarrass Alex Jones. It shook the entire media landscape. Long before the showdown with Jasmine Crockett, Alex Jones had already carved out his place in American culture, a place soaked in controversy, fueled by rage, and built on the ashes of other people's pain. To some, he was an entertainer. To others, a prophet. But to millions more, he was nothing less than a megaphone of madness, a loudspeaker of chaos. Jones first emerged from the fringes of late-night radio, his voice a gravelly sermon of suspicion. He told listeners not to trust their government, not to trust the media, not to trust anyone but him. He cast himself as the lone man who dared to say what others feared, who exposed hidden plots and shadowy cabals. For a public hungry for someone anyone seemed fearless, his paranoia sounded like courage, and so, his audience grew. InfoWars was his kingdom. A digital empire dressed up as journalism, where wild theories passed as headlines and fear was packaged for consumption. On his platform, nothing was too outrageous, no conspiracy too absurd. From chemicals in the water turning the frogs gay, to secret globalist plots of population control, to the claim that mass shootings were staged with crisis actors, Jones fed a steady diet of outrage to an audience ready to believe. The more shocking the claim, the faster it spread. And the faster it spread, the richer Jones became. But his rise came with wreckage. The Sandy Hook massacre, where 20 children and 6 educators were gunned down in 2012, marked a turning point. While families grieved, Jones accused them of faking it. He told millions of viewers that the tragedy was an elaborate hoax, a staged play to push gun control. Parents who had buried their children suddenly faced harassment, death threats, strangers demanding proof that their sons and daughters had ever existed. For those families, Jones's words weren't entertainment, they were torment. Years later, juries would award them nearly $1 billion in damages, labeling Jones's empire for what it was: defamation, cruelty, lies. And still, he raged on. Jones reveled in the image of being untouchable. Every lawsuit became proof that he was the victim of a grand conspiracy. Every condemnation, a badge of honor. He strutted into courtrooms unrepentant, railing against kangaroo trials and tyranny. The arrogance was staggering, the bravado relentless. He wasn't just a man with a microphone anymore, he was a performance, one that demanded constant escalation. That arrogance spilled into politics. During the Trump years, Jones found his voice amplified even louder. He boasted about private conversations with insiders, claimed to shape policy, and declared himself the vanguard of a populist revolution. His rants bled into mainstream debates, his talking points repeated on bigger stages. On January 6, 2021, his words echoed through the chaos in Washington. When some of his followers marched with fury, convinced by years of Jones's insistence that America itself was under siege. Through it all, he perfected the art of the meltdown. He yelled, he cursed, he turned red in the face until it seemed he might explode, and audiences couldn't look away. To some, it was proof of passion. To others, proof of madness. But to Alex Jones, it was branding. Rage was his product, and he sold it better than anyone else. Yet for all his fury, for all his empire, there was a truth Jones had never faced. He thrived in echo chambers. On his stage, he was king. In his world, his word was law. But in the wider arena where facts met fiction, where calm met chaos, he was fragile. Fragile because noise only works when no one dares to cut through it. Fragile because power built on fear can collapse with just a single act of dignity, and that fragility was about to be exposed. For years, critics tried to hold him accountable, but most had played by his rules. They yelled back, argued with his volume, and became swallowed in his storm. No one had truly disarmed him. No one had stood in his presence and simply refused to be dragged down to his level. Until Jasmine Crockett, when she entered that studio. She wasn't stepping into a debate with Alex Jones. She was stepping into the lion's den of American disinformation. The man before her had humiliated grieving parents, fueled mobs, and laughed in the face of justice. He believed no one could outlast his rage. And yet, for years, no one had confronted him like this. Before Jasmine Crockett walked into that studio. Before she locked eyes with Alex Jones and faced down the storm, she had already lived a lifetime of battles. Her story didn't begin under bright lights or in front of microphones. It began in neighborhoods where justice felt distant, where opportunity wasn't a guarantee but a fight, and where resilience wasn't an option, it was survival. Born in St. Louis, Crockett grew up watching how power treated the powerless. She saw neighbors struggle against systemic neglect, families pushed to the margins, voices ignored until they disappeared into silence. Those early years planted a seed. She learned quickly that silence could be deadly, and that speaking up even when your voice shook was a form of resistance. Education became her weapon. Crockett pushed herself relentlessly, knowing that knowledge was the sharpest blade against injustice. Law school wasn't just a career choice, it was armor. She didn't walk into courtrooms to collect accolades. She walked in to stand beside people who couldn't afford to stand there alone. As a lawyer, she fought for the accused, the overlooked, the people written off as statistics. In every case hardened her resolve, sharpening her ability to remain calm under pressure, to stand her ground against prosecutors, judges, and institutions larger than herself. But the law was only the beginning. When protests erupted in Ferguson after the killing of Michael Brown, Crockett was there not as a politician, not as a public figure, but as a defender. She represented activists who had been arrested, using her skills to shield them from a system designed to silence dissent. She wasn't afraid to put herself on the line. In those heated days, with streets filled with smoke and chants, Crockett understood something fundamental. Justice wasn't abstract, it was lived, breathed, and fought for in real time. That fight carried her into politics. Crockett ran for office not because it was glamorous, but because she knew the laws she defended her clients against were written in rooms she didn't yet occupy. If she wanted to change the system, she had to step inside it. And so, with grit and persistence, she climbed, winning a seat in the Texas legislature before rising to the U.S. Congress. Her style was unmistakable. Where others in politics dodged, she confronted. Where others softened their words, she sharpened hers. Crockett wasn't afraid of conflict. She thrived in it, but not in the way Alex Jones did. His conflict was chaos, hers was clarity. His noise was destruction, hers was defensive dignity. When her colleagues tried to steamroll her, she held her ground. When pundits mocked her, she doubled down. Every insult thrown her way only seemed to harden her resolve. Her supporters saw her as more than a congresswoman. She was a symbol of perseverance, a black woman, in a system built to keep people like her out, now shaping the very debates meant to silence her community. To immigrant families, she represented hope. To women, she embodied resilience. To the younger generation, she was proof that you didn't have to wait decades to make your mark. You could fight now, you could win now. And yet, what made Crockett powerful wasn't just her fire, it was her calm. The ability to remain unshaken while others lost control. The patience to let arrogance expose itself. The wisdom to know that sometimes the loudest weapon you can wield is silence, followed by truth delivered at the perfect moment. This was the background she carried into that studio. Years of learning to face institutions louder, older, richer, and more entrenched than herself. Years of being underestimated, mocked, written off only to prove again and again that she couldn't be dismissed. Alex Jones didn't know it yet, but the woman across from him wasn't an easy target. She was a storm he couldn't control. Her rise was not without scars. She endured threats, insults, smear campaigns, and constant questioning of her legitimacy. But each attack added another layer of resilience. Each attempt to silence her only amplified her resolve. Crockett understood what Jones never would. Dignity is stronger than noise. So when producers booked Alex Jones and Jasmine Crockett on the same broadcast, they thought they were staging a debate for ratings. They thought they were putting fire against fire, chaos against chaos. What they didn't realize was that destiny had already written the script. One man's empire was built on lies and bluster. The other's power was built on truth, service, and the unshakable dignity of a woman who had faced down worse storms than Alex Jones. The cameras may have caught a clash of voices, but history would remember something far greater, the moment arrogance finally met its match. And the match was Jasmine Crockett. So when the producers booked them both on the same broadcast, destiny had already written the script. The red light blinked on. The broadcast had begun. Millions of eyes were now fixed on a table that seemed far too small to contain the storm about to erupt. Alex Jones wasted no time. Before the host had even finished introducing Jasmine Crockett, Jones leaned forward, jabbing his finger at the camera like it was a weapon. His voice erupted into the room, thick with rage. She doesn't care about America. She's part of the machine. Another puppet of the host tried to steer him back, but it was useless. Jones was already off the rails. He thundered over questions, ranted about conspiracies, turned every topic into a rant about betrayal and plots. And when Jasmine Crockett finally opened her mouth to speak, he cut her off mid-sentence, laughing bitterly, mocking her credentials, belittling her as just another lightweight in Congress. But Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she sat with her hands folded neatly in front of her, eyes locked on him with the same composure she had shown in courtrooms and on the House floor. Her calm was unnerving. Every time Jones expected her to yell back, she didn't. Every time he demanded she play his game, she refused. And the contrast was undeniable. Viewers at home saw two people in stark opposition, one shouting, sweating, red with fury, the other steady, unbothered, refusing to be dragged into the mud. The more Jones tried to provoke her, the more foolish he appeared. His insults, once weapons, began to sound like tantrums. His interruptions, once signs of dominance, began to feel like desperation. The host attempted to regain control, asking Crockett to respond. Jones cut in again. Don't waste your time. She's not going to answer honestly. She's just here to spout talking points. He pounded the table so hard the microphones rattled. Still, Crockett waited. And that waiting was power. It forced the audience to notice the imbalance. One person unraveling, the other refusing to move. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was a mirror, reflecting back every ounce of Jones's insecurity. Finally, when Jones paused long enough to catch his breath, Crockett began to speak. Her tone was measured, deliberate, her words chosen with surgical precision. She started, not by attacking him, but by addressing the viewers at home. She talked about why truth mattered, why facts mattered, why dignity mattered, in a democracy under siege by noise and lies. Her voice was calm, but her message sharp as a blade. Jones couldn't stand it. He barked over her, calling her a fraud, a liar, another Marxist trying to destroy freedom. He leaned so far across the desk, it seemed he might topple onto her, but Crockett didn't lean back. She stayed exactly where she was, her steady gaze making him look smaller with every passing second. The escalation built like a drumbeat. Jones yelled louder, threw wilder accusations, gestured frantically at the cameras as if trying to will the audience onto his side. But the more he raged, the clearer the truth became. This wasn't strength. This was panic. Panic in the face of a woman he couldn't rattle, a truth he couldn't bury. The tension was unbearable. Viewers could feel the moment tightening, like a bowstring pulled back to its limit. Everyone knew something was coming. Jones was circling, attacking, foaming with desperation. Crockett was holding, steady, waiting. And then, Crockett leaned in with the line that would stop him cold. For a long, agonizing second, the studio went quiet. Cameras kept rolling, lights burned hot, and the audience watching at home leaned closer to their screens. Alex Jones had just finished a furious red-faced rant, shouting, gesturing wildly, slamming his fist against the desk like a preacher out of breath. And then, silence. Jasmine Crockett didn't interrupt him. She didn't shout back. She simply leaned forward, folded her hands, and let the quiet stretch. It was a silence that felt like a verdict, and everyone could feel it. Even Jones blinked, confused, as if realizing for the first time that his roar had echoed into nothing. Then, Crockett spoke. Calm, clear, each word deliberate. Like she was hammering nails into the coffin of his argument. Mr. Jones, she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. You've made a career out of exploiting fear. You've spread lies about children who were murdered, about families still grieving, and you've profited off their pain. That's not patriotism. That's predation. Gasps rippled through the studio. Even the host, who had been nervously shuffling papers, froze. On social media, the clip was already going viral, users clipping the first 10 seconds of her response, captioning it with things like "she cooked him alive" and "this is the moment Jones lost control." Jones sputtered, his face growing redder. He tried to interject, that's listen, lady. But Crockett didn't flinch. She raised her voice only slightly, enough to be heard over his protests. Never losing her composure. You yell because the truth threatens you, she said. You interrupt because you can't defend what you've done. But let's lay it out plainly. You told millions of people that grieving parents were actors. You pushed supplements while pretending to be a savior. And when the courts held you accountable, you hid behind bankruptcy filings. That's not strength, that's cowardice. The room tilted. Jones slammed his hand again, stammering, that's globalists, twisting you don't understand. But his words fell apart. His bluster, once so overpowering, now sounded like static against Crockett's steady rhythm. Crockett leaned in closer, her eyes locked on him. You want to talk about America? Let's talk about service. I became a lawyer to defend people who couldn't afford a voice in court. I ran for Congress to fight for working families. I answered to the people, not to advertisers, not to conspiracy websites, and not to fear. Applause broke out in the studio audience. It wasn't supposed to happen. Live audiences at political debates were usually told to stay quiet, but the people couldn't help themselves. It was the sound of release, of decades of frustration with the chaos machine now being confronted head-on, and still. Crockett wasn't done. You call yourself a truth-teller, but the truth is this, you've been lying to Americans for profit, and every time you scream about being silenced, it's really just fear. Fear that one day the facts will outlive your shouting. Well, today is that day. Jones's lips trembled. He tried to laugh it off, but the chuckle came out strained, hollow. His forehead glistened under the studio lights. For a man who built his brand on dominating every conversation, the sight was stunning. Alex Jones, cornered, Alex Jones, unraveling. Social media exploded. On Twitter, hashtags like #Crockett destroys Jones and #MicDropMoment trended within minutes. TikTok flooded with reaction videos, teenagers lip-syncing Crockett's words, creators splicing memes of Jones, sweating with captions like "when the lies catch up to you." On YouTube, clips racked up hundreds of thousands of views before the broadcast had even finished. Crockett let the reactions build before delivering the final blow. She straightened her posture, her tone calm once again, like a teacher delivering the moral of the lesson. You see, Mr. Jones, democracy is built on debate, but debate requires honesty. And you don't come here with honesty, you come here with chaos. And chaos is not free speech, it's an attack on it. For the first time, Jones was silent. He stared at her, his jaw twitching, but no words came out. The cameras captured every flicker of his face. The rage, the humiliation, the realization that he had finally met someone who couldn't be bulldozed. The host, sensing the weight of the moment, dared to ask, "Congresswoman, are you saying Alex Jones is unfit to participate in this debate?" Crockett didn't hesitate. "I'm saying he's unfit to be taken seriously." And tonight, America saw why. The audience erupted again. Cheers, applause, even a standing ovation from some. Online clips were replayed with captions like this: "Was the exact moment Alex Jones got exposed on live TV?" Comment sections flooded with disbelief. "Did this just happen? I've waited years for someone to say this to his face." Jasmine Crockett is a national treasure. Jones finally broke the silence, slamming the desk again. "This is a setup. This is what they do. This is tyranny." But his words no longer landed. They sounded desperate, hollow. Even the host moved past him, turning the floor back to Crockett for closing remarks. She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "The difference between us is simple. You exploit fear. I fight for people's hope. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'll keep standing." The cameras cut, the broadcast wrapped, but the moment had already outlived the show itself. By the next morning, headlines would blare: "Crockett crushes Jones in explosive live debate." "Alex Jones, humiliated on national TV." Mic drop heard around the internet. And just like that, the loudspeaker of chaos had finally met the immovable force of dignity. The clip spread like wildfire. Within minutes of the broadcast cutting to commercial, the internet had already seized on the exchange. The hashtag Crockett exposes Jones shot to the top of Twitter's trending list, outpacing celebrity gossip, sports playoffs, and even breaking world news. TikTok editors worked with lightning speed, chopping the exact moment Jasmine Crockett leaned in and delivered her surgical takedown into looping 10-second clips, often paired with sound effects, the infamous Mortal Kombat finish line, or the deafening mic drop audio sting. Within an hour, there were hundreds of edits. Some played Crockett's line in slow motion, overlaying flames behind her as Jones stammered. Others spliced in the audience gasps, adding zoom-ins on Jones' face as beads of sweat formed under the studio lights. The moment was no longer just a debate exchange. It was content, viral, unstoppable, and everywhere. On Instagram and Reddit, the meme machine roared into overdrive. Someone photoshopped Jones as the "This Is Fine" dog, surrounded by flames, holding a microphone. Another made a split screen. On the left, Crockett calmly sipping tea. On the right, Jones, veins bulging, captioned with "When your lies meet receipts." By evening, celebrities joined in. John Legend retweeted the clip with the caption, "This is what composure looks like." Kick Palmer uploaded a TikTok reaction, her jaw dropping as she mouthed along to Crockett's words. "Oh, she ate to that up." Late-night host smelled blood. On The Daily Show, the host replayed Jones' flustered stammer in slow motion, comparing it to a car alarm trying to argue with a lawyer. On Jimmy Kimmel Live, they aired Crockett's takedown with a mock instant replay graphic, like a sports highlight. The studio audience howled as Kimmel deadpanned. Alex Jones went up against a congresswoman with a law degree and found out courtroom rules don't care about conspiracy theories. But it wasn't just pop culture. Politicians began weighing in, too. Progressive leaders praised Crockett's composure. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted, "Truth matters. Facts matter." Jasmine Crockett showed us how to hold liars accountable with dignity. Even some moderates, usually hesitant to wade into viral moments, applauded. One congressman commented, "In an age of chaos media, Crockett's.com dismantling of Alex Jones is a masterclass in leadership." Jones, meanwhile, became the punchline. Every attempt he made to spin the encounter only deepened the mockery. On his next InfoWars broadcast, he tried to frame himself as the victim of a setup, but clips of his excuse-riddled rant were instantly clipped, memed and drowned under replies like, "She lives rent-free in your head now." For years, Jones had built his brand on invincibility, the man who never backed down, never admitted wrong, always shouted the loudest. But now, the image was cracked wide open. Millions had witnessed, in real time, a version of him stripped of that power, sweating, sputtering, unable to control the narrative. His loudspeaker of chaos persona suddenly looked less like strength, and more like desperation. Commentators framed it as a symbolic shift. What Crockett did wasn't just rebutting Alex Jones. One columnist wrote, "She punctured the mythology of the bully. She showed the emperor has no clothes, and she did it with a whisper, not a scream." On YouTube, reaction videos racked up millions of views. Influencers broke down Crockett's strategy like sports analysts, pausing to highlight her timing, her use of silence, the way she let Jones implode before dropping the hammer. One viral tweet compared it to watching Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope an opponent until the knockout punch. Even classroom teachers and debate coaches picked it up. As a teaching tool, this one professor posted alongside the clip is how you argue with composure. Facts plus patience greater than noise. For Crockett, the moment was more than viral fame, it was vindication. Years of grinding as a lawyer, an activist, and now a congresswoman had prepared her for this exact kind of battle. Not just against Alex Jones, but against the culture of lies he represented. And yet she wasn't content to let it end as just a meme. Behind the scenes, Crockett's team was already moving. They clipped the footage, added captions, and reposted it with a simple message. Facts greater than fiction. Truth greater than lies. Leadership greater than chaos. They weren't going to waste the wave, they were going to ride it. For Jones, the night was the worst in recent memory. For Crockett, it was the beginning of something much bigger, because she understood something that even Jones, the self-proclaimed master of attention, had never fully grasped. Viral moments don't just fade, they can be leveraged, expanded, turned into movements. The clip wasn't just a one-off takedown, it was a rallying cry. And Crockett was already planning how to channel that energy into action. The internet had crowned her the victor. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She leaned into the microphone, both in the studio and to the millions now watching online, and made it clear this wasn't just about exposing one man's lies, it was about something much bigger. But Crockett wasn't done yet. She turned the moment into something much bigger. When the echoes of the viral clash finally settled, the story could have easily ended there, as just another internet sensation. Another trending clip that would fade in a few news cycles. But Jasmine Crockett refused to let it stop at entertainment. For her, the exchange had never been about sparring with Alex Jones for ratings, or about winning applause from the crowd. It was about something deeper. The principle at stake, truth versus lies, dignity versus chaos, accountability versus reckless noise. In the days that followed, Crockett reframed the narrative. While Jones fumbled to regain his footing, grasping at excuses and conspiracy-laced defenses, Crockett stepped forward with a message that cut through the noise. This was never about me, she told a press conference the morning after the broadcast. Her voice steady, it's about all of us. It's about whether we, as a people, will tolerate misinformation shouted loud enough to drown out the truth, or whether we will stand firm, even when it's hard, even when the insults are flying, and say, no more. The words resonated. They reframed what millions had just witnessed. Viewers no longer saw it as a simple clash of personalities. They began to view it as a symbolic moment, a litmus test for how America handles the onslaught of conspiracy culture. Crockett had given them a lens to interpret it, not a brawl, but a lesson. Crockett pointed to her own journey, a lawyer who had defended those without a voice, an activist who had marched when silence was easier, a congresswoman who had faced the glare of Washington politics. Each chapter had demanded resilience, but this latest chapter reminded her of something simple. The truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs the courage to stand its ground. In America, she declared during an interview on MSNBC, we don't bow to bullies. We confront them with facts, courage, and dignity. That's who we are at our best. That's who we must be again. The line became a rallying cry. It was clipped into inspirational videos, quoted on posters, and replayed on podcasts. Teachers referenced it in classrooms. Commentators echoed it on air. Even celebrities outside the political sphere, athletes, musicians, actors, reposted it with hashtags of solidarity. What had begun as a fiery debate had morphed into a cultural touchstone. Meanwhile, Alex Jones found himself diminished in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the laughter at his expense, the memes, that painted him as red-faced and unhinged. It was the deeper wound. His chaos had been met not with equal chaos, but with dignity, and dignity had won. That was the piece that unsettled him most. He thrived on dragging opponents into the mud, on making them lose composure so he could claim victory in the wreckage. But Crockett had never taken the bait. She had stood calm, collected, and devastatingly precise. It wasn't just a defeat. It was a demonstration that his playbook had lost its power. For everyday viewers. The moral was clear. The clash wasn't about political sides, or about who could yell the loudest. It was about how truth behaves when cornered by lies. It doesn't need theatrics. It doesn't need rage. What it needs is clarity, courage, and the patience to wait. For the noise to tire itself out, noise fades, she told a town hall days later. But dignity endures. Lies may travel fast, but truth will outlast them every single time. Our responsibility is not to match the noise, but to rise above it. The crowd in that hall stood to their feet because they understood something. This wasn't just commentary on a broadcast moment. It was a life principle. By the end of the week, what had begun as a clash on live television had grown into a movement of sorts. Hashtags shifted from mocking Jones to uplifting Crockett's message. Faith leaders cited her stance in sermons. Parents used it as a teaching moment for children. It had become bigger than politics, bigger than the players involved. It had become about what kind of country people wanted to live in. Not one where bullies could shout down the truth, but one where truth could stand tall, quiet, patient, and powerful until the noise exhausted itself. And so the moral crystallized. Justice and integrity will always outshine arrogance and deceit. It wasn't just a victory for Jasmine Crockett. It was a reminder for everyone watching. In a world addicted to noise, dignity is still the sharpest mic drop of all. And there it was, the moment stamped into internet history. Alex Jones had gone nuts, shouting himself hoarse, red-faced and rattled, trying desperately to claw back control of the conversation. But Jasmine Crockett, she didn't flinch. She exposed his lies live in real time for the entire world to see. It wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a collision between chaos and clarity, arrogance and integrity, noise and truth. And truth won. Now here's the part where you come in. Moments like this don't just live in a vacuum. They grow when people like you hit share, when you drop that clip into your group chat, when you repost it with your own caption, when you join the wave that says, enough with the lies. Enough with the noise, facts still matter. So if you felt even a spark watching Crockett dismantle Jones, if you caught yourself nodding, laughing, maybe even cheering out loud, don't let that energy fade. Subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss the next takedown. Share this video so the truth outruns the noise. And join this movement for something bigger than just one viral moment. A movement for truth, dignity, and accountability. Because here's the moral stamped into the night. When dignity stands, tall lies will always fall. And Crockett proved it not just with her words, but with her calm, unwavering courage. The chaos screamed, the truth whispered, and the world listened.